everyone, Casual tf2 in the house, speaking to you from my brain once again. From my brain, quote unquote. There was a guy that I used to live with, okay? That's what I want to talk about. And this guy that I used to live with, he was very good with his words. He was a wordsmith, you could say. And you could tell that he really saw speaking as an art form. He gave it a lot of care, a lot of respect, and he had a lot of attention to how he spoke. And that effort he put in, something came out of it. And he was easily the most charismatic person I've ever met, is how I would describe him. And so we'd often have some interesting conversations about this very thing, about this topic of the power of language and the nuances of communication. And so at one point in one of our chats, we came together to this idea that there is always a right thing to say. There is always a right thing to say. And you can say this another way. You can say that there's always a fucking perfect, a fucking nice, a fucking really, really good way to communicate whatever it is that you need to communicate to someone else. So even in the worst situation you could imagine, right? Let's say you killed your neighbor's dog. Even in that situation, there's some way that you could say that to them, you could break that news to them, while still being honest about what happened, that would make them not be mad at you about it. And maybe there's even a way that you could explain that to them, a way that you could communicate that news to them, that would actually get them even to sympathize with you, right? The very best outcome. So if we zoom in on this scenario of you've killed your neighbor's dog, you have to tell them somehow, while still being honest to their face, and we draft out every single permutation of all of the strings of words that you could possibly put together to explain it to them. And then, also, we calculate every single permutation of the tonalities that your voice could have on each word, the timing and pauses of those words. And then we also factor in every permutation of your facial expressions and your body language throughout this little speech, this little thing you tell them, right? We take this gargantuan, insanely large number of possibilities, right, of all those aforementioned things, all the ways that we could possibly tell them this information, that we could possibly communicate this to them. And so we run a simulation over and over again to test each and every one, right? We're inevitably going to find that out of all these gazillions of combinations, there is one set of a permutation of words, tonalities, and expressions that is going to be the best of all these options. And so based on this thought experiment, I don't think it's crazy to assume that if you could somehow communicate with that level of statistical superiority, you could run that simulation in your head and then choose and say things in the very best way. You'd basically be making miracles happen everywhere you go, right? This would be the most unfathomably overpowered superpower that you could have. Now, of course, it would be very hard to ever know how to communicate in the very, very, very best 1 in a trillion way in any given situation, right? It's hard to run that simulation, but that also means that there are billions of options that are still in the extremely, extremely fucking good category, right? They may not be the very singular best possible option, but there's still an insane amount of really, really, really good ways to communicate whatever you have to communicate. And so you can think of this more realistically as a testament to the power of how we communicate ideas. And so me and that guy that I used to live with, that I mentioned, we really bonded over sort of being inspired by this idea, that we really felt like, man, there's always a way. Do I know it? Maybe not. Maybe I have to brainstorm. But man, there's always a way to say things really, really well. And it just makes things better for everyone. You win from it. And then there's also a way to say things that even make other people feel like they've won, even in the worst of situations, right? It's being able to project a good perspective, basically. What should seem beautiful and inspiring about that is that it's not so important what our idea may be. Another way to phrase this is that our idea itself is not limited by what the idea is. It's really limited by how we present that idea. How? It's true that there are so many factors to consider in communication, and of course we can only reasonably expect to reach a certain level of expertise with it, but it's still clear that there is absolutely a hierarchy of how well you can communicate an idea, and that ranges from, what we could consider catastrophic, relationship-shatteringly awful, to maybe so good that it makes your neighbor that you accidentally killed their dog, it makes them want to bake an apology cake for you. And while I do find this topic to be really exciting and interesting to get into, I'm only bringing it up right now as a layer of context for an idea that has been quite entertaining to me recently, and that is that in the same way that in any given situation, there is a quote-unquote perfect thing to say, right? The best thing you could say that will lead to the best outcomes for you. What if, in any given situation, there is a quote-unquote perfect thing to think that will lead to the best outcomes for you? And so I'd say yes to that. I'd say yes, there's definitely, in any given moment, going to be a perfect thought that you could have that would be so insanely positive and life-affirming and inspiring and motivating, all those good things. And I know we can get a little scared around the word perfect, so let's just say that there's a spectrum of thoughts that you can have at any given moment. Some will feel better than others, some will be more inspiring than others, and some will be more discouraging than others. Some are going to be more enlightening than others, etc., etc. But there's a big range on the quality of a thought that you could have in terms of its goodness for you at any given moment. So whatever problems you are dealing with in life, whether it's something very small and trivial or very large and consequential, they can all be solved, or at least alleviated, which effectively is the same thing as solving it, by the right thought. And so you might be thinking, well, thoughts are great and all, but there's more to life than thinking, such as doing. And that's totally correct. But actions are often motivated by the right thoughts, right? So even the most objectively impossible task that you could imagine will still be attempted by someone if they believe they can do it. And conversely, the most objectively easy, basic, accomplishable task you can imagine will often not be attempted by someone who believes they can't do it. So regardless of who does or doesn't achieve whatever in those hypotheticals, both of those people, the one who believes in themselves and the one who doesn't believe they can do it, both of their actions, or lack thereof, are directly connected to thoughts and beliefs they have that are regularly swimming around in their own mind. And so I'm sensing, some of you are probably catching my drift by now and thinking, wait, casual, I can't control my thoughts. There's no free will, bro. Thoughts just appear in my mind. They just show up without my consent. How can I have the perfect thought if I don't decide which thoughts come into my head when? And I'll say to that, you have a point. Thoughts do just appear in our minds without our consent. That's true. However, our thoughts aren't completely random, because they are influenced by the thoughts that we've had before them, and by our experiences, and by the stimulus we are exposing ourselves to. We still have an illusion of free will, even if you don't think free will is real. The illusion is there, right? You still identify with thoughts in your mind as your own, which is fine, really. That's completely functional, to buy into thinking your thoughts are your own, because if you didn't, you'd be at risk of completely losing your marbles and blissfully dying in the streets or something like that. But to honor the perspective of someone who feels powerless in controlling their thoughts, or someone who struggles with successfully buying in to that completely real and effective illusion that you can control your thoughts, I'd say for them that fate has led them to this point in the video to engage with these ideas, right? You are predestined. You've been predestined to listen to me talk about this idea right now, which will set you forth on a path of your subsequent thoughts being influenced by these thoughts that I'm implanting in your mind right now about quote-unquote perfect thoughts and the power of what you think, right? So I've inflicted my own will or my own illusion of free will onto you, and now you're on this roller coaster with me, so sorry. But anyway, being a person, being a human, the human experience is very complicated. It's a complex thing. So when a thought appears in your mind, you are able to be aware of it and deem whether it is beneficial to you or not. And you may not do this at all, or maybe you do this process unconsciously, but you can do this. You can be aware of what you think and form an opinion about whether or not that is a useful thing to think. And something else you can do that proves very useful is that you can ask a question. So when you ask yourself a question, when you ask your mind a question, when you ask into that void of unconsciousness a question, the void gives you back answers. If you wake up in the morning and think, what do I have to do today? I'm sure there's a 99% chance that your mind is going to start showing you thoughts related to that question. Maybe, oh, I have to go to work, I have to eat breakfast, I have to drop this thing off, I have to go to my sister's house, right? You're going to get feedback from your mind if you ask it a question. If the first thought you have in the morning is, oh, shit, what do I have to do today? It's very rare that you're going to have no thoughts then about what you have to do today after that, right? So thoughts trigger and relate to thoughts that come after them. But this process of asking questions, this is really where a lot of creativity comes from, in my opinion. It's how a lot of it works for me. You look at a blank canvas and you ask yourself, what could I put here? Right? So if you ask the question, you'll get answers. And maybe it will be hard to get answers if it's a particularly hard question. Or maybe, and this was probably the case for a lot of people, if you say, oh, well, I don't really get answers, you probably just don't like the answers that you're getting, right? Maybe you think, oh, I thought what I wanted to put in the canvas was dumb or something. But that's your problem. It doesn't mean you're not getting answers. But let's imagine you're struggling with these things, right? You're struggling with either you're asking a really hard question, so you're not giving answers, right? I could ask you some crazy question about some topic that you know nothing about, and then of course your brain's going to kind of freeze up a little because it's like, wait, Casual, I don't know anything about music theory or physics or whatever it is, right? So it could be a very hard question, and then it could also be that you don't like the answers that you're getting when you do ask the question. So to solve both those problems, all you have to do is keep asking the question. You got to be persistent. You're going to have a lot more ideas, and maybe a lot better ideas of what to fill that canvas with if you keep asking that question, right? If you ask yourself the question, what can I put in this canvas, just for 30 seconds, you're not going to get as many answers as if you ask yourself all day long. I'm just going to sit here and keep asking myself, what could I put here, right? You'll probably get a lot more answers. You'll probably get a lot better answers. And so I think some of you now might be wondering, but Casual, what if I don't think of the question to ask, right? Because there's not going to be answers if I don't know to ask the question, right? If I don't think of the fact that I need to ask the question, I won't ask the question, I won't get the answers. And you're right about that. So I'll help you out. Again, I'll help you out. I'll ask the question for you. What are the perfect thoughts that you could be thinking right now? And forget about me. Forget about the context of you watching this video. You're a character. You got your own life. You got your own things going on, your own feelings, your own sense of time, your own relationships, past experiences, history, endeavors, your own hobbies, right? You got all of that. I don't know that. That's your life. But based on all that stuff, if you take a bird's eye view at yourself, where you are right now in life, what are the questions you should be asking? Right? What would be the perfect thoughts you could have that would rejuvenate you with passion and inspiration and make you excited about this game of life that you are playing? And ask yourself, because those perfect thoughts you could be having right now do exist. Right? What idea would get you feeling really good about things? What idea would that be? There's something. There's probably a lot of things. What idea would get you to grow? And this is the tricky thing, because we don't want to grow at some level. We don't want to do the things that will be good for us, right? And we know this because if we did, we would just do them. If you really want to do something, you oftentimes just do it. If it really seems like it's going to be good for you. But the reason we don't want to grow, the reason we don't want to do those things that are going to be good for us, is because we just truly don't get it. We truly don't get that those things would be good for us, or that growing would be good for us. We might think it intellectually, but really we don't get it. On a core level, we really don't believe those things are good. And so we have the wrong thoughts that are keeping us from those things, or maybe we are just lacking the correct thoughts to have about the situation. And, we are habitual creatures, and we like familiarity and comfort, and we often default to playing things safe, preserving the status quo. And some of this is totally reasonable, right? Some element of control and stability is good. But we also become kind of lazy about thinking about our lives creatively. And so we miss out on all kinds of things that we would actually genuinely enjoy and find fulfillment in. We miss out, because we get lazy about how we think about our lives. So what idea would get you feeling really good about things? Think about it. And there's probably a lot of ideas that would do that for you. And they come in all shapes and sizes as well. Maybe this idea is to rewatch some TV show that you just haven't thought about since you were a child. Maybe it's to finally quit your job and change careers. And maybe it's just to wear a certain combination of socks and shoes that you'd never consider. It really could be as simple as that. And so, for as methodical as we often try to be with reality, the irony is that being a human is also so hilariously irrational. If there was a simple rubric for happiness, there wouldn't be so many unhappy millionaires. There wouldn't be so many unfulfilled, degenerate hedonists. So what might make you feel really excited and inspired about life right now might seem very big and serious, like proposing to your girlfriend or starting a business. But it could also seem very simple and random. And so this is tricky. You got to watch out for it, because it could also just be that you want to try some new food item from the grocery. And it can even be very conceptual and abstract. Like maybe you're just very excited about the idea of trying to take the bus without paying for a ticket. And this is weird because it's sort of thing only a human would get excited about, because it's still riding the bus, right? You might do that any other day on a generic commute, but now it might feel special for some reason just because of the concept that, oh man, I'm riding the bus for free. I didn't pay. I snuck on, right? It changes the experience even though it's objectively, quote unquote, the same thing. We're just riding a bus. And that can be perfectly valid. We are conceptual, weird, abstract creatures, and sometimes those things do fulfill us. So be open to these perfect thoughts coming in a lot of different forms. But considering that, you can still have some discernment, right? Like, let's say I ask myself, what would get me feeling the best right now about life? And maybe an answer to that comes in my mind is that I want to do speed. I want to do some street drugs, and I want to rape people. That's the thing. That's what would really get me feeling great about life right now. And so even if we grant that I would feel very inspired about life by doing that, which I would lightly disagree with, it would have all kinds of consequences that would ultimately be uninspiring and probably make me feel bad. I'd feel guilty about raping people. I'd feel disillusioned about normal life after feeling that high of whatever drugs I was on, right? I'd get into legal problems now that would make my life worse in all sorts of ways, etc., etc. There's all kinds of problems that would come from that and create a net negative situation. So there's nothing wrong with a little healthy discernment, but my guess is that most of you are not on the side of needing to remember, hey, disqualify that meth rape fantasy. You're probably actually closer to the side of needing to let yourself take some risks. There's people out there who hate their job. They want to quit, and they won't. I bet there's at least one person listening like that. At least one. There's people out there who want to ask someone on a date, but they won't. And there's also people out there who are feeling inspired to read a new book, but they tell themselves, I can't read that because I haven't finished the old book yet. And I relate. I relate to all those people. But I also say to them, so what? So what, man? Don't finish the old book. Get rejected by the girl. Have a career crisis. And why? Well, because your fear of those things happening, right? You're trying to protect yourself from this bad thing happening. I'm not going to ask her out because I don't want the rejection and all the bad feelings with that. I'm not going to quit my job because I don't want all the mess of having to engage with figuring out what I really want to do and going through the effort of finding a new job, right? You're protecting yourself from these things you're afraid of. But your fear of these things is getting in the way of you following what you're actually inspired to do. And we know this because that inspiration that comes can be very magical and genuine. It gives you life. And when you actually genuinely want to do something, and you do it, pardon me for the oversimplification, but that's feeling good about life. That's inner harmony, right? You want to do something, you do it. And so, of course, there is some rationale behind our fears, It's not meaningless, I'm afraid to start the new book because I know I value finishing the book that I already started. Even if it's not intrinsically appealing to keep reading that book, I still have this value of I want to finish books, so I'm not going to read the new one until I finish the old one. The fear is there to protect my value about finishing books. But at some level, you have to ask, what's the point of that? Is it still really serving me in this situation? Because sure, it would be really nice if I finished every single book I started. And I can say, sure, it would be nice if every person I asked out on a date said yes. And I can say, sure, it would be nice if I kept working at this place that I hate because it pays well, right? It would be nice if I was the best fucking golfer in the world. That would be super nice. That would be super nice. If I could score hole-in-ones on any golf course in the world, that would be so nice. But in reality, would I enjoy what it would take to get me there? Right? Maybe someone would, but for me, that's not my calling in life, to spend 6+ hours a day with a golf club in my hands. That doesn't make me excited about life, that process. And so if we look at those previous examples, sure, it would be nice if I finished that other book instead of starting a new one. But in reality, I would have finished the unfinished book already if I really was actually excited about it. In reality, wouldn't I rather read the book that I'm actually excited about right now than cling to this ideal that I'm going to finish this one that I'm not excited about? Right? Maybe that system doesn't make as much sense as we act like it does. And so when you ask yourself this question, of what would be the best idea I could have right now that would get me excited about life and looking forward to do something, you might find yourself running into some objections when you get your answers. And so, for example, maybe what your answer is that you would really like to take some time off work and you want to go on a week-long fishing trip, right? That's your answer. But then your other voice in your head kicks in and says, I can't do that because I don't have enough money to go on a fishing trip. I can't do that because I'm going to get fired. I can't take that time off work, right? I can't do that because I don't deserve it, because I'm a lousy fisherman and my friends are going to make fun of me and judge me for taking time off for something as silly as that. So here's the thing. Is the bad thing that you're worried about happening really that bad? Ask yourself that. I mean, is it really? Because let's say you're afraid of getting fired, right? You can find another job, right? Maybe you're afraid that you don't have enough money. You can take out a loan. You can put it on a credit card. You can ask your family to lend some. I don't endorse it, but you could steal it, right? You can always make more money later. Whatever you're afraid of around this idea of, oh, I don't have enough money to do this, it's only like that because you've basically made the choice that it's not worth it, right? If you decided that I absolutely, no matter what, have to go on this fishing trip, nothing else matters, you'll figure it out. You'll get the money, or you'll take out the loans, or you'll steal it, or whatever the hell, right? You'll figure it out later, getting the money back, right? Because you realize that's so insignificant in the scheme of what the importance of this thing actually is to you as a real person, to someone with drives and feelings and fantasies and inspirations and quote unquote soul, right? But something that is alive, right? That needs more than just following instructions and rules to feel alive. Maybe more so for some of you than others. But back to the examples, right? You're afraid that your friends are going to judge you or that you're not deserving enough of it. Maybe you are deserving of it, and maybe your friends won't judge you. And if they do, maybe you'll find out that it's worth it anyway, because maybe that's the sign you needed to finally move on and make better friends. And so, of course, with this line of thinking, I could talk all of us into fucking off from our responsibilities and partying until the debt collectors are banging on our doors. But that's really not what most of us need. I mean, that's the thing. It's not that this is bad logic because you could talk yourself into anything. It's that most of us don't need that extreme situation that makes it seem like scary logic, right? That's probably not what's really the best possible outcome for us. Maybe for one of us it is, right? Maybe there's some depressed, uptight workaholic who needs to go let off some steam for the first time in their life and just worry less about everything and be a little irresponsible. They benefit from fucking off and living dangerously for a little while. But for most of us, it's not that. That's not our true, genuine inspiration, what's going to get us excited about life right now in the best and honest way. That's not it for most of us. However, what we really are most inspired to do might still seem scary and risky and feel equivalent to betraying our responsibilities, right? It might not be so black and white as, well, obviously I'm not going to go, smoke crack in the streets and fucking attack people. But it might seem like that to you. It might seem that quitting your job and going on the fishing trip is just as bad, basically, as going out in the streets and smoking crack and attacking people. Right? It still feels equivalent to betraying our responsibilities. But what that could also mean is that our responsibilities might be due for revision. Right? When do we wake up and say, okay, this thing that, I've committed to isn't serving me, right? There's some situations where it's like, don't give up on your child, right? But can you give up on your company or whatever? Yes, you can do that. That's not, some ethical disaster. I'm going to kind of move the conversation now in a slightly different way. There is an artist that I really admire who said in this one interview that his advice was to follow distractions. Follow distractions. That's the advice. That's the wisdom. And it can seem like crazy advice. But I think for a lot of us, for most of us, it's really just about letting us letting yourself follow where that current is already flowing within you. Because the value of this is that following what is exciting and inspiring to you will give you some renewed interest in being alive. And so I know this, temperament can vary a lot from person to person in regards to this. And I'm sure there are some people who actually get a lot of joy and fulfillment out of consistency and relentless familiarity. But for me, that's stuff that deadens me. So I thrive off of new things. I thrive off of my curiosity and my interest to learn. And I've made the mistake enough times of not acting on those inspirations. And I've realized that when I did not act was truly a loss. It was truly a missed opportunity. Because when you genuinely get excited about some idea and you want to do something, there's no guarantee that that feeling is going to stay. Right? Even if it stays consistent in your life, maybe, the intensity of it is still going to change. That desire will wax and wane over time because we're constantly in a state of change, right? Life has its seasons. What you're inspired to do today may be different tomorrow. Even if you were inspired for a long time, maybe the way that desire is will change, right? Maybe you always want to be an author, but maybe the kind of books you write today are going to be very different from what you'll want to write in 20 years. And this is proven true, this changingness of us. And it's proven true by looking at your past and seeing all the ways that you have changed. And you are the same person, right? You're different, you've changed, yet you're also the same at each stage in your life. And so the thing is, what excites you right now might never be here again in this way. So go do it. Go act on it while you still truly want to. Because the saddest thing of all would be that by the time you finally allow yourself to do the thing you wanted for so long, to chase that dream of what really inspires you, you don't really want to do it anymore. That would be the saddest. As if by the time you finally let yourself, the desire just isn't there anymore. Right? And so maybe part of the reason that I get so much value out of novel ideas and getting enraptured in random fantasies about what I can spend my time on is that it gives me something to look forward to. So generally, if I look back on the past too much, for me that's a bad feeling. If some sort of crisis were to sweep me up right now and inject me into a very different lifestyle. So let's say there was an apocalypse, or I go to prison, or maybe I die and I'm reviewing my life and myself from an afterlife or something. If that happens, something like that happened, there is a part of me that will always feel quite sad looking at my life, looking at my history, looking at what's happened, When I look at each stage of my life, I see the version of myself that entered that stage. And I see all their high hopes and aspirations that they had for that coming future, and how basically a lot of those high hopes and aspirations weren't fulfilled. When I think of all the houses and different places I've lived, I remember how I felt when I moved into those places. And I remember what I was hoping for in that next era when I moved in there, I remember what all that felt like. And then I compare that, I think of what actually happened in my life when I lived in that house or that place. And usually each era has always been so much less than what I'd hoped for at the beginning. And, we can interpret this in lots of ways. But the point is, it doesn't matter too much what really happened, or if I have damning ideals and expectations, or a mix of both, or whatever, because the point is, I know this is how I am, okay? And so, in a lot of ways, I am at peace with my past, the most that I ever have been, right? But it doesn't change that discrepancy that I have between what I hoped for and many of the struggles and problems that I faced. But the reality, right, is that I'm still here. I'm going to have to keep being alive. There's going to be more eras, and based on the past, potentially more misalignments of my expectations and what actually happens, right? unfulfilled aspirations, you could say. So, with this in mind, regardless of what happened in the past, I need to keep staring into the future with those same high hopes. And why, right? Why have the high hopes? Why have the fantasies? They're not there so that I can compare my hopes for something with the outcomes of my life and then feel a certain way about it. They're there, and they're important, so that I can feel excited in the now. That's their function, having high hopes for the future. It's about feeling excited right now. That's what it gives me. And that's the only time that's ever truly real and experienced, is right now. So, I guess to give more context, when I think some thought, let's say I'm thinking, oh man, wouldn't it be awesome to make a video talking about bad water for 12 hours? The utility of that thought is that it gives me something to look forward to. It gives me something to be excited about now. And while that video, right, did become real, for every talking about bad water for 12 hours, there's going to be like 15 other ideas I got excited about for some of varying amount of time, and then I didn't finish, right? But even if I didn't finish them all, they still served a purpose in keeping me excited about life, right? Even if I never finished anything I made, and I just jumped from project to project and spent my life following distractions, if I was just always doing stuff I enjoyed and was genuinely excited about, isn't that good? Isn't that all that matters? Isn't that enough? And I understand some of you might be a little cynical about this because you're sort of seeing a certain side of me, especially here in my my need for novelty and my need for feeling excited, right? Why can't we? You know, life's not all about feeling excited, casual, and it's like, okay, yeah, I get it. But a lot of this comes from that I know very well what a place feels like of having no excitement for life, of having no inspiration for life. And that is a terrible place I don't want to be. When we don't let ourselves follow distractions or indulge in new fantasies, it really leaves us with less of a reason, and maybe I'm speaking for myself here, but it leaves me with less of a reason to get up in the morning and do anything and take on the day, right? If I say, no, I can't have those ideas, you're not going to finish that video, don't think about it. You're not going to, you got to finish your old book, don't try the new one, right? If I shut down all those little inspirations that come up inside of me for whatever logistical reason, it doesn't, I'm only hurting myself. I'm only denying myself reasons to get up in the morning and want to be a person, you know? Anyway, similarly, so when we are overly depressed and anxious and we put ourselves in a state of paralysis where we have trouble doing anything, our mind naturally wanders to the past. And I would say that's because there's nothing pulling it to the future, and thus offering a more inspiring present. Right? If you've got nothing going on, if you don't let yourself do anything, there's nothing to look forward to, so you're just going to look to the back, to what's already happened, right? And for me, that's a recipe for just inaction. So if you are like me, you know that, right? Because you know that your mind dwelling in the past is a largely destructive fixation. And so all this wisdom, it's stuff we know on some level. It's not new, but it's the type of thing that we really benefit from being reminded of over and over again. You know, it's always beneficial to be reminded, to truly be reminded and truly get that our thoughts are powerful and that they change our perspective about things. And changing our perspective can help us go from feeling bad or okay to good or great. And if you don't want that, I can't help you. I mean, I assume you're with me on that one and wanting to feel good. So let's say right now that you're in bed and your alarm has been going on and off, and you keep snoozing it, you keep delaying getting up. You know intellectually that you should get up, right? You want to on some very basic level of like, yeah, I should get up. But you just don't feel it. You don't have the will to get up that's inspiring, right? And so you'd rather stay in bed. And this is what you do in this situation. And the problem, right, of why you intellectually want to get out of bed, but you don't. Why? It's a lack of perspective. That's what I would say. It's a lack of perspective. So there's going to be certain thoughts that could appear in your mind that would make you look at the prospect of getting out of bed in that moment in a new way. In a way that makes it seem that getting out of bed is actually more pleasurable than staying in bed. Right? And then getting out of bed is easy. It's not a war with yourself anymore. And I want to put a pin in this because great things can be achieved by someone who commands themselves tyrannically, by someone who wins the war with themselves, yes. But at what cost? Right? And is this the only way? Right? Even if it's worth the cost benefit, what if there's just a way to do it without having that huge internal war, right? If needing to steamroll yourself and say, fuck you, just get up anyway, right? What if you could just do it because you're like, oh wait, I do want to get up because there's things I'm excited about, right? That seems easier to me. You know, so what if that problem that feels like a battle or a war within yourself just felt good to solve, felt easy? And so the only reason you might not buy into a certain thing fully yet is because you haven't had the right thought about it, right? You haven't had the right perspective about it yet. That's going to make you realize that this problem is actually easy, or it's something you're excited to solve rather than something that's like this terrible thing that's torturing you, you know? You haven't had that right thought come yet. That's going to change your perspective about it. And those thoughts will come if you ask for them. But you gotta ask. So I use this hypothetical of getting out of bed on a particular morning, but the philosophy can apply to any situation, any problem you're having in life. And so you don't really resolve the war by just conquering one side or forcing a compromise. But what if instead both sides just genuinely thought that the best outcome would be that they signed a peace treaty, right? But not because they're forced to, right, or out of fear, but what if they just both thought, yo, wait, I actually am most inspired by the idea of us signing a peace treaty and ending this war, creating internal harmony within this human being, right? We're getting weird in the metaphors, I know. A lot of this can seem like self-deception, right? Aren't I just tricking myself into thinking something that will serve me? And the answer is, yes, you are, buddy. But the crazy thing is, and this is how placebo works, right? Is that people go, oh, there's a pill that you take, and in the placebo trial, people got better when they took the placebo pill, right? So that means the pill doesn't work. Means the pill fucking works, right? The pill intrinsically, they didn't do anything to it, right? It's fucking water or salt packet or something, right? But the point is, when people think they're taking a pill, the pill actually fucking works, right? It's placebo, yeah, because we trick ourselves into it. But if we actually successfully trick ourselves into it, it's not a trick anymore. It's just real.
I cast a shadow, a lingering feeling of denial, of a past I never hoped for, and dreams that I could someday feel. 'Cause I will dance with the guilty bodies as we walk side by side, and even share my blood, believe my God, but he could never be a friend of mine. And I hope that I could have a change of mind.